Hi everyone, it's LadyJenevia. How are we all doing, Stan Twitter? Are we all in recovery after being introduced to angry Andy Barber? Today's video is a spoiler review of Defending Jacob episode 6, and if you watched my spoiler-free review of this episode that I posted last week, then you will know that I had said that we would be introduced to a very angry and aggressive Andy Barber in this episode. And as you can see, I was absolutely right. If you watched my spoiler review of episode 5, which I posted last week, then you will have seen me introduce on my channel something that I've been doing on Twitter, which is to post 4 memes that act as a spoiler-free preview of an episode the week before it airs. And in that review, I went through each meme and I explained what each meme meant. Well, I ended up doing that again this week for episode 6. So in this review, I'm going to once again go through and explain each of the memes and what they correspond to in this week's episode. And we'll talk about a few other things as well. Also, if you are looking for any of my other Defending Jacob reviews, I have put a link to my Defending Jacob playlist in the pinned comment of this video, which contains all of the videos that I've made about Defending Jacob since the embargo first lifted on it. Here we go. First meme. Like I said, Andy gets really angry and aggressive in this episode, so this meme could really be applicable to any one of the outbursts that he had, manhandling Neil, telling Jacob off for doing exactly what he told him not to do, rear-ending Leonard Patz's car and then yelling at him in the streets, confronting a strange man that has been spotted more than once outside of your house on the street that you live. It's always funny to see Stans posting about Andy Barber as if he is a character that has it together, when he most certainly does not. That's right, ladies and gentlefolks, Andy Barber has officially snapped. This is the same man that has been entirely condescending to Lori for the entire show about her ability to handle difficult information, when he's so deeply in denial that he ends up creating more problems for himself and his family. So let's just go through the list, shall we? Andy manhandles Neil at the office in front of everyone, and as hot as many of you probably found that encounter to be, I would like to remind all of you that Neil is the prosecutor on Jacob's case. That means that he is getting paid money to try to convince a jury to find your son guilty. We've already established that Neil does not like you. Why are you giving him this reaction? Do you think before you act? No, you absolutely do not. We all know Neil sucks. You know that. You've been working with him for we don't know how long, but certainly a while. You, of all people, should know better. By the way, I would like to pose a question to those of you that have read the book, because I myself have not read the book. I only looked up a synopsis of it after I finished watching all of the episodes for the first time. Did they ever explain in the book any sort of backstory on Andy and Neil's hostile relationship? Was it always like that, or did they have some sort of falling out? I did not know until someone left a comment on one of my reviews over the last week that apparently in the book, Andy did not slash Derek's mom's tire in the book, but instead he broke into Derek's family's house. That's gonna be a big yikes from me. Clearly the people running this show wanted to make some revisions so Andy would actually have a chance at being a likable character to the audience. Meme number 2. Remember when I pointed out how Andy had explicitly told Jacob not to be getting online and to be mindful of what it is that he shares online, but then Jacob went and did exactly the opposite of that? Well, things have come full circle. Obviously, at the time of me saying that in my reviews, I could not elaborate on the fact that this was going to be returned to in the way that it did, but now that we've all seen this epic blow up, we can talk about it. When Andy was kicking off at him, I was getting my whole life, because it's about damn time you reprimanded him for something. Maybe if you didn't baby your son so much, you wouldn't be in this predicament in the first place. But what really got under my skin was when Jacob had the audacity to say, "It's not that big of a deal," Oh, you had better believe that I was ready to snatch up this child's laptop and phone and throw them out the second-story window. You know what? No more personal devices for you. Do you think I had the unrestricted access to anything and everything on the internet when I was that age? Absolutely not. I know that there are probably people who think that I am always on Lori's side and I think she's always right and Andy is always wrong. That's not true. In this case, where Andy is telling him off for not only disobeying what he said by creating a secret Instagram account, but irresponsibly posting a meme that can further sour public opinion against him, Andy was absolutely right to go off the way that he did. He's the one with the in-depth knowledge of how criminal court cases work, so he knows better than anyone what exactly is at stake here by going so far as to post a murder meme about yourself. That's an incredibly damaging thing to post, particularly once it gets out to the public, which of course it did. Guess who's going to be on the jury of your case, Jacob? Members of the public. Now, I don't want anyone getting the wrong idea here. I do not believe that parents should yell at their children in excess to the point of being abusive. But if you need to yell at your child because they've stepped so far out of line and clearly handling him with kitty gloves was not working, then by all means, go for it. Yell at him. Shame him into growing some sense. See, I can easily see a lot of white kids watching this and going, oh, why is Andy being so mean? Meanwhile, all of the non-white viewers who grew up with immigrant parents are gonna watch this encounter play out and go, that was just another Tuesday in my household growing up. It would have been nice, though, if Andy had bothered to confront Jacob a whole lot earlier than he did. What about that explicit content he's been looking at online? Are we still just gonna pretend like that's not a thing that happened, that you know about, that you still haven't told your wife about? You don't think that between that secret Instagram account and those explicit websites he's been visiting, that perhaps now would be a good time to revoke his access to the internet in the privacy of his own room? Take away his laptop. If he really needs to use a computer to do some sort of academic assignment, you should have a family computer that he can only get on when it's time to work on those assignments, and you have all the means to go through the computer after he's used it if you really want to make sure that he's not doing anything he's not supposed to. I've seen the size of your house. Don't rich-splain to me about why you cannot bother to get another computer. While we're at it, go ahead and get a really old school mobile phone that does not get on the internet. Calls and texts only. It would be even better if he has to hit the 7 key 4 times in order to get the letter S when he's text messaging. Yeah, that's how old I am. You just didn't realize because I have a 10-step skincare routine. Meme number 3. This meme is mostly in reference to the information that Andy learns, and really everyone involved in the trial learns, from Matthew regarding Leonard Patz. By the way, if it wasn't obvious already, Leonard Patz should 100% be in jail. It doesn't really make a difference whether or not he was involved in what happened to Ben. He's a predator. Throw him under the jail. Speaking of Leonard Patz, how about that confrontation on the streets? That sure was dumb. I mean, if you're going to confront him and threaten him, why are you doing it in broad daylight when anyone could have seen it and, oh, I don't know, recorded it on their phone? Are we just conveniently forgetting that more or less everyone has a camera in their pocket at all times? It's not 1985 anymore. Meme number 4. This meme was about the test results, which are now in. This was actually one of my favorite parts of the episode and just the show in general because I studied psychology in my higher education, and it's still a field I find really interesting when I'm analyzing people, whether in or out of fiction. I wanted to write down exactly what it was that Dr. Vogel said about her findings regarding Jacob so that I could make sure that I'm not misquoting her so we can talk about how it applies to the story. And just a reminder before we get into all of the details that everything that she found was something that was not only present in Jacob, but Andy, and Granddaddy Barber as well. So I'm gonna look down at my notes to make sure that I don't read these wrong. She found the Grin1 variant, which is a receptor that's been linked to traits like impulsivity and recklessness. Impulsivity and recklessness. You mean like attacking Neil in front of all your work colleagues? Or how about attacking Leonard Patz in broad daylight when anyone could have seen it? She also found a dopamine gene linked to a limited capacity for empathy. I shouldn't laugh at that. You mean like not having empathy for an underage victim of a predator, so you go to his house and yell at him and try to strong-arm him into sharing his story when maybe he's not entirely ready to share it? Or how about slashing an innocent woman's tire so you could go intimidate her son into sharing information that he might not exactly feel comfortable sharing with you, of all people? Or how about not having any understanding of what it was that an underage girl went through after being sexually coerced and calling her a slut when all she ever did was try to be your friend? Dr. Vogel also found a form of testosterone receptor known to induce violent behavior in adolescents shortly after puberty. Do I really need to repeat all the examples that I've already given here? How about one I haven't mentioned yet? The tire iron incident? Dr. Vogel also says, but if a young person is already capable of moral reasoning, these genes won't just cause the brain to flip a switch. And I will point to Andy as proof. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, Andy is very annoying when he finds out these test results and says, this means nothing. And he also says, that's just psychobabble. Wrong and wrong. Dr. Vogel did not say that having these things in your genetic makeup means that you absolutely are going to exhibit these behaviors. All she was explaining was that there is a correlation between the two. Your brain is integral in determining how you behave. The human brain is very complex and it's constantly being researched to better understand human behavior. If you experience certain stressors or trauma while your brain is still at crucial stages in its development, then that is very likely to affect the way you behave for the rest of your life. Also, if you sustain some sort of head injury or head trauma, you can undergo a drastic change in your behavior and even your personality depending on where it is in your brain that you are injured and how severe the injury is. So to claim that this information is just psychobabble is just as problematic as undermining people's general struggles with mental health in the first place. Nowadays, the topic of mental health is being discussed more than ever, which is great, but at the same time, it's often things like depression and anxiety that are treated as the more palatable mental disorders, as opposed to conditions like antisocial personality disorder or schizophrenia, for example. Let's pose a hypothetical. Let's just say that Andy had told Lori about his family history much earlier on in their relationship, and she responded really well to it because he's opening up to her, he's being vulnerable, and from where she stands, this information is not enough to outweigh all of the good things about him that she fell in love with in the first place. So in this hypothetical, let's say that they still got married and they still had a child, and that child was Jacob. Early on in Jacob's life, at age 5 to be more exact, Lori notices some problematic things in Jacob's behavior, like, oh, I don't know, trying to murder another child at a bowling alley. Witnessing this behavior makes her remember about Andy's family history. Neither Lori or Andy are experts in the field of psychology or the human brain, so of course, them being rich white people, they can afford to seek out specialists that can better inform them of these conditions. Essentially everything that Dr. Vogel has done on the show, they're able to do at a much earlier age. In this hypothetical, let's presume that Lori, being the empathetic person that she is and a very strong, determined woman, pushes her family, reluctant as they might be, to go into counseling. So Jacob can get counseling to better process and work through his emotions. And even Lori and Andy can go into counseling because maybe she starts to notice some things that are a little bit off from her perspective about Andy's behavior as well. So at a very young age, Jacob would be getting counseling to help him with his emotions and his behavior, and if it was deemed necessary, maybe he would get on some medication. So now in this hypothetical situation, let's fast forward to around age 14 or 15. I don't remember exactly how old Jacob is supposed to be in the show. He would have had approximately 10 years of counseling. That's 10 years for him to be learning and reflecting and trying to better develop skills that would help him in a situation where he encounters a bully like Ben. Additionally, at this point, he would probably have an understanding that he's living in a household where communication is key and it's very welcome and encouraged. So even if he is struggling with the emotions that he's feeling about being bullied at school, he might feel inclined to, oh, I don't know, tell Andy and Lori about it and they can talk about it together. They can either work it out with the people in charge at the school to get Ben to calm down and stop being trash. This way, regardless of whether or not Jacob did what he's being accused of on the show, Jacob would be in a much better position, because if he did do it, then maybe he wouldn't have done it if he had gotten the help that he needed a lot earlier. And if he didn't do it, then at the very least, this version of Jacob Barber would be functioning at a much higher level than the version that we see on the show. And that, Andy Barber, is why psychology and biological psychology is not just psychobabble. When you go to get checkups with your physician, they will ask you things about your family history. So if there is a pattern of something like breast cancer or heart problems, whatever it might be, then your physicians are going to be more likely to check more carefully for those conditions at a much earlier stage, so that if something does happen, then they can try to deal with it much sooner when you're more likely to have a better outcome. The same principle applies to mental health. If you know that certain psychological or behavioral disorders run in your family, you should at the very least try to be mindful of that so you can take whatever steps are necessary to manage that. I know that I've said in other reviews that, oh, Andy's being annoying because he won't stop lying to his wife. And the reason why that tends to bother me so much as a viewer is because I've had far too many encounters with men who are toxic and gaslight and refuse to take accountability for their own misdeeds. But to be honest, the denial thing that he's got going for him as a character is the most annoying thing about him. Because if you can't even acknowledge that there's an issue, then absolutely nothing will be fixed. There is no way to work on something if you won't acknowledge that it's something that needs to be worked on in the first place. Anyway, really sorry if you were not interested in a long tangent about psychology, but it is something that I'm not only interested in, but I think is highly applicable to this show, and especially this episode when all this information is coming out and how it applies to a lot of the characters. Go to therapy. It's how you look after your health, the same way that you would go and get checkups. The last thing I want to discuss a little bit is in reference to some of the things that I've been mentioning and hinting at vaguely in some of my past reviews. Specifically, I had been talking about how there was a point where something happens on the show and I thought that it didn't make any sense that the character is not getting their phone out in the situation, and now that episode 6 has aired, we can talk about it, because I was referring to Andy confronting this strange man in the car with a tire iron. Because in my mind, I'm looking at that scenario and I'm thinking, well, obviously you should get your phone out and record this confrontation. I mean, first of all, me in that situation, I would never confront that person because I'm a woman and I wouldn't confront a strange man in a car. I would be worried about getting murdered. So that's a big no from me. But, you know, you're a tall, muscular white man. You think that you can just go confront him, which fair enough. Okay, whatever. However, it still makes more sense to get your phone out, even if you're still going to go confront him and even if you're still going to insist on bringing that tire iron, because if you record it, then you can ensure that you will get an image of the license plate, you can get an image of the man's face, and if he were to make a threat against you, you have it on video and you can use it for evidence. But the reason why I take back my criticism of the fact that he didn't get his phone out is because now that I've been able to rewatch the show because of making these reviews, it makes perfect sense that he wouldn't do it, because they just had this revelation about what is in the genetic makeup of Andy Barber and all the Barber men, but that's besides the point. In this specific case, we were talking about Andy Barber, and they just said that his genetic makeup has things that correlate with things like violent behavior, impulsivity, and recklessness. Check, check, and check. Of course he's not going to do the logical thing in that scene, because that's not who he is. Anyway, there is probably a whole lot more that I could have discussed about this episode, but considering that I've checked the analytics on these reviews, and a lot of times people just watch them for the first few minutes and they don't bother to watch this far, I might as well just cut it off there. However, feel free to comment down below if you would like to discuss it more in depth, because I'm more than happy to respond to my comments. My channel is small. If you leave a comment, I'm probably going to see it. Also, if no one sends me any angry Andy Barber fan cams, then what was the point of all of this? Also, let me know in the comments if you would like for me to still do memes for episode 7, because I'm struggling a bit with trying to figure out if I have a decent enough selection, and also just the nature of episode 7. I don't know if it's quite as entertaining to execute that concept for episode 7, but if people really want me to still try to do it, I am willing to give it my best attempt. Don't forget to like this video because it really helps out my channel. I will also leave some links to some of my recent video essays. Most recently, I posted a video essay on the BBC One drama Gold Digger, and it was really bad. Not my video essay, but the show itself. It's one of the most terrible shows I've ever had the displeasure of watching, particularly in recent years. I don't know how the BBC signed off on that, but my next big video essay project is going to be on a film that I love, and one of the actors in that film is Chris Evans. So if you would like to see that video whenever I get around to finishing and posting it, you should probably subscribe to my channel. It might take me a few weeks at the very least to post it because I know it's going to be a really long one, but I've decided I'm doing it. Stay tuned for my next upload, which will be a spoiler-free review of episode 7. It'll be really short, but I will do it nonetheless. See you in the next one. Bye.